Sometimes you can have the right individuals, but when they put them together in a team, it doesn't work. And I want to talk for my second part of the speech around what happens when you put all these people together in a gang, if you like. And there are a couple of problems I see often when I'm called in to help work with teams. The first is that from a decision-making perspective, which is kind of where I center my work, because teams, if you think about it, teams are about creating options, making decisions, turning that into action, and turning that into results. So I often see, well, in fact, no, research shows that teams, on average, make worse decisions than the most capable individual in the team. So they actually bring the quality of decision-making down, and that's a bit of a problem. I also see that meetings, the bane of many of your existence, if you actually think about how many of them are useful, we tend to find that between 20 and 40% of meetings are, 20% to 40% of your time is spent in meetings that are of zero value. And I see that as a problem as well. The third problem I see with teams is what I call the witch situation. And this is where someone in the team is referred to by a name like the witch behind their back, which is pretty sobering, right? So I'm going to read out to you a quote from, this is, all the names have been changed, but this is from a team survey I did in a company that's not in the media space last year. And one of the questions was an open-ended question about, how could your team be better? And this is what one person replied. The appointment of Miss X to director was not dissimilar to Hitler being granted absolute power during the Third Reich. Her removal from the company was a joyous occasion, only trumped by the levelling of the Berlin Wall as one of the great episodes of undoing inhuman injustice in our recent history. The only disappointment was that David Hasselhoff did not sing as she was removed from the premises. Unfortunately, Miss X was one of the most dangerous combinations in that she had considerable confidence and ambition, but was a complete idiot. Now, that's quite funny, right? And I love his writing, or her writing, I don't know, his or her, that was anonymous. But it points to a serious problem, which is that often in our companies, there is someone who's labelled in that way. And if that's happening in your team, you really need, if you're the leader of that team, that is a massive wake-up call, because that means you have no trust if you're having those corridor conversations. So it's a really big wake-up for you if you've got someone who's being labelled. You've either got to do something about it, if they really are like that, and you've got to stop the corridor conversations. So when I look at teams, we normally kind of diagnose what are the problems with teams. And this guy called Patrick Lencioni has helped us with a framework for the 5 problems that teams have. And I use this a lot because it helps us go, right, we need to do this, and then that, and then this, and then that. It gives you a framework to work with. And it works like this. The first problem that teams have, as evidenced by the witch situation, is the absence of trust. And what happens here, the symptoms of a team with lacking in trust, is that you don't get honest feedback. People are unwilling to come out of their zone to help others in the team. And you get this sense of everyone pretends to be invulnerable and that they have no weaknesses. And if you're an emerging manager, you need to think about this, because don't pretend to be invulnerable and perfect. Own up to your weaknesses. So we'll come back to that. So there's the absence of trust, which leads to a fear of conflict. Conflict, if done constructively, is really powerful. That's where ideas come from. That's where decisions happen, is when ideas rub up against each other and clash. Constructive conflict is really important. If you don't have that, you get this artificial harmony, the symptoms of which are really boring meetings where no one really says anything and no one really lines to it and there's no disagreement. You want disagreement. Then what you get out of that is you get a lack of commitment, which is that people kind of nod and go, yeah, 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 but they're not really committed to doing the projects that you've agreed to. You get ambiguous about who's going to be doing what. Then you have an avoidance of accountability, because I don't know if you're going to do your bit, so I don't really, I may not do my bit, and I don't really care about what the team does as a whole. I just start looking after my patch, which leads to the last bit, is an inattention to the results of the team. And this moment that I caught myself in a couple of years ago, where a project went wrong, and I found myself thinking, I've just got to protect the fact that I did my bit right. And if you have that moment, or your team are having that moment, I've got to show my boss that I didn't screw up. And it doesn't matter about the team, that's a really bad thing, right? So you can find this all in his book, Patrick Lencioni. I just want to boil down to, what do you do about that? So we run this team diagnosis, and this isn't a real example. I'll show you roughly what I might do if I was working with a company called Alphabetti, right? So we do a team diagnosis, and we ask some questions like this. And the results on the right are dark green, strongly agree, light green, agree, grey, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. And you get a kind of net score by giving 2 points for strongly agree and 1 for agree, etc. And you can diagnose where the team's issues are. And this one is around decision making and communication are probably the weakest areas. But the key to this is you need to show it to the team themselves. It's no good doing that and hiding it, and you know it and they don't. We actually kind of put that up in front of the team, get them all standing around and talking about it. And you start to get this really honest conversation. So not only you get building a bit of trust, because I can see what other people think. You get in some honest conversation, and you get more committed plans coming out of that. So reflecting the team's current performance is really a crucial area. And the team needs to recognise that people have very different views. So you may think your team's brilliant, and one of your teammates might think it's awful. So that's the range you can see on the scores there. So what do you do about that? I just want to talk to you, for my last piece really of this, to talk to you just about trust. I'm not going to talk about any of the other areas. I want to talk about trust and how you build it in your team, because it is the foundation of good teams. And a team I worked with about 6 or 7 months ago, they had a bit of they felt like their team wasn't operating correctly, and they said, well, so we're looking at how we have more parties. And so I said to them, you know what, culture, you need to think about trust before you think about parties. So this is what I advise you to do if you think you might have a trust issue. So again, the symptoms of trust issues are lack of open conversations, people won't give feedback, people hold grudges, people spend time looking after and keeping up their own appearances, and they don't rely on each other. So the first thing you need to do is actually establish vulnerability. So if you're an emerging leader, it's actually a really good idea to own up to your weaknesses and to admit your errors, which is an uncomfortable idea because the leaders we see on TV never admit their weaknesses or errors, Mr. Tony Abbott, right? But research shows that if you do that, you start to build trust and people start to open up to you. You have this sense of vulnerability and you can start relying on each other, which you can't do if you pretend to be perfect. So vulnerability is something I really think you should think about opening up to your small weaknesses. The second area is that people in your team want to know that decisions get made fairly. And in my experience, in all the companies I've ever worked in, often a decision will come down from on high. And by the time it filters down to you, you had no idea why they made that choice. It didn't make any sense. You got no explanation. And also, it didn't seem to fit with the world as you saw it. So you end up scratching your head, and you end up not aligned to that. So here, the job of a leader is primarily to listen to people, that active listening skill, and show them that when you make a decision, you have taken into account what they think. Even if you decide in a completely different direction, you say, look, I heard your feedback, and I decided to do this because X, Y, Z. So acknowledge their feedback. If they feel heard, they think it's a fair decision. So that's a really important part of it. And the last bit is about communication, which is a huge topic in its own right. All I will say on it is that it's about stopping those corridor conversations is one element of it. So communication has to be direct and honest and not calling people a witch behind their back. Right? That's a bad thing. All right. So I will close by trying to give you a practical sense of what I would do if I was a new manager or had a team that wasn't working as well as I wanted it to do. So these are the 4 steps I'd probably take. First of all, I would work on those purpose, mastery, and autonomy. Now that can be done, a bit of that is collective, but a bit of it is tailored to the individual. So I start talking about, how much freedom do you want in your job? And we all worry about people who don't, as emerging managers, you really worry about those people who turn up late to work. And for some of us, that gets really annoying. And you've got to get beyond that and get the trust that they're going to deliver the results. And I think one of the other things that goes with that is the trust that they can do things better than you can. If you're in an early stage emerging manager and you've got this mindset that you can do everything better than your team because you've got promoted from their position into this new position, then you are never going to get trust because people can see through that. So you have to find the trust in your team and get the right people, if not, that can do things better than you can. So set their PMAs, work with them about their autonomy, what's their skill set, how are you going to give them rapid feedback that they're getting better at their skills. The second area is this look in the mirror. So you have to let the team know how it's really performing, and you have to allow everyone to have a point of view on that, because your view won't be as accurate as you think. When you survey the team, they may think quite differently what to you as the leader think. So hold up the mirror, and this is where we do things like surveys anonymously and then mirror the results back to everyone. The third is around tangible vision. So it's fine to have a purpose, and that's great. I help the world make better decisions. But you need a tangible vision, which is where's your team going to be in a year's time? And what does it look like? And the word tangible is really important here. Any sense of vision, right? We've all spent far too many away days trying to come up with a vision which is really vague. The important word here is tangible, in that your team must be able to see themselves in this future scenario. They must be able to feel it and understand what it's like to be in that team in a year's time. So you give them a tangible vision for what the team wants to be in a year. So you talk to them about where's the team today, where do you want the team to be in a year, and of course the final step is creating the plans to get there. It's pretty simple, but by doing this together with the team and having the team work on itself for a while, rather than just the jobs they do for other people, you can really align them around the actions you take and say, there's 3 things we need to do in this team, and these are what they are, this is going to be who's going to be accountable for it. We're all committed to it because it's been a fair decision-making process, and we can move ahead and build this team together and have a sense of collective ownership of where this team goes. So those are the kind of 4 steps I recommend to you. And I would also say that these are some of the questions you need to be asking yourself and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, do my team really trust me? Do I give them purpose? Do I help them master their skills? And do I give them enough freedom? So there's some of the questions I think you need to ask yourself that fit with everything else I've talked about today. And look, I would close by saying there are 2 types of people in the world. There are people who have a fixed mindset, who believe that I am who I am and that's it and I can't really change. And there are people who have a growth mindset, which is, I believe we can change and I believe we can learn. And I think you're all here today because you have a growth mindset and you want to learn and you want to be a better manager. But the one key thing is you've got to go and do something about it. You've got to find managers who are going to show you the way. And that's not just your direct manager, because they might not be brilliant. They might be good at some things but not good at others. So find good managers, talk to them. And most of all, just try one thing. Out of today, pick one thing that you're going to try to do differently and test it and see if it works. And then try something else. So go on that journey of trying to be a better manager rather than just cruising through, getting your performance review once a year and going, oh yeah, I'm not very good at that bit, and then forgetting it for another year. Right? So try something, get out there and have a go. Be a growth mindset and try and be the best manager you can be. So that is my section, and I hope you got something out of that. And thank you very much. I'll take questions afterwards, okay?